If you've ever been out for a meal with someone who is genuinely careful with money, not necessarily cheap, but intensely intentional about every single dollar, you've likely witnessed a moment that makes the rest of the table go silent. Maybe they ask the server for tap water and a stack of napkins instead of a $4 side salad, or perhaps they pull out a calculator at brunch to split a $23 check down to the exact cent. You might even see them factoring in the thermal energy cost of whoever sat closest to the heating vent. While you're sitting there wondering how someone making six figures can be so preoccupied with pennies, they're operating on a frequency that has very little to do with the actual math of the situation. Today, we're going to dissect the psychology behind this behavior. It might surprise you to learn how little it actually has to do with the money itself. Dr. Klontz, a renowned financial psychologist, has spent years studying what he calls money scripts. These are unconscious beliefs about money that are programmed into us at a very young age, often before we even fully understand what money represents. People who are extremely careful with their spending often developed what is known as a money vigilance script. This script acts as an internal program that makes them believe a financial catastrophe is always lurking just around the corner. It is as if their brain has a money alarm that goes off at the smallest sign of spending, even when that spending has no real impact on their long-term financial health. Research shows that this vigilance usually stems from one of two primary sources. The first is growing up in an environment where parents constantly stressed over money in ways that left deep emotional marks. The second is experiencing a personal financial trauma, such as a bankruptcy or watching a family business collapse. To cope with that pain, the brain subconsciously files the experience under "never again" in permanent marker. It installs a high-tech surveillance system for the future to ensure that same vulnerability is never felt again. However, this behavior isn't always born from past scarcity. Some of the most penny-conscious people you will ever meet actually grew up with money. This sounds contradictory until you realize their parents were likely thrifty as well. These individuals inherited the anxiety without ever having to face the actual crisis. It's a bit like developing post-traumatic stress from a war you didn't personally fight. You feel the money anxiety physically in your body, even though your current lived experience doesn't justify it. Your nervous system doesn't care about logic. It just knows that spending money feels dangerous. This is why people will reuse Ziploc bags until they're falling apart or drive 11 miles across town to save 9 cents a gallon on gas, even if they burn $3 worth of fuel just getting there. The math doesn't add up, but the psychology is perfectly consistent. There is another type of extreme saver whose motivation is rooted in something else entirely: control. In a world that often feels unpredictable and chaotic, extreme thriftiness becomes a way to exert authority. Dr. Newcomb has found that when people feel their lives are spinning out of control, whether it's due to job insecurity, rocky relationships, or external economic factors, they grab onto the one thing they can control with both hands and squeeze until their knuckles turn white. You might not be able to control whether your landlord decides to sell your building, but you can absolutely control whether you buy name brand or generic aluminum foil. Having one corner of your life where you make the rules often matters more than the 70 cents you actually save. This explains why you meet selective penny pinchers who exhibit bizarre inconsistencies. They might refuse to pay for parking but then drop $2,000 on a rare vinyl collection without a second thought. They might clip coupons for dish soap while leasing a luxury vehicle. These contradictions exist because they are being miserly in areas that provide a hit of control, while spending freely in areas that feed a different emotional need. Interestingly, psychologists have discovered a sweet spot in money management. People who are mindful about spending and save consistently tend to report feeling more secure and content than those at either extreme. Moderate financial caution is actually a boon for mental health. The problem is that most people either can't find that middle ground or they fly right past it. They end up eating ramen by candlelight to save on electricity despite having a very healthy retirement account. The line between being financially responsible and psychologically concerning is surprisingly thin. At their core, extreme spending and extreme saving are often two sides of the same coin.
Both are efforts to manage anxiety. The spender seeks emotional fulfillment through the act of purchasing, while the saver seeks to build a castle of security to protect against unnamed disasters. They are pursuing the same goal of safety through different methods. However, we must consider the social cost of extreme frugality. People who pinch pennies to an extreme degree often end up isolating themselves. When you're the person who never wants to go out because everything costs money, or if you look so uncomfortable at a happy hour that it feels like a hostage situation, people eventually stop inviting you. This leads to loneliness, which increases anxiety, causing the person to grip their money even tighter. It becomes a self-reinforcing feedback loop designed to protect against a danger that isn't really there. This behavior also takes a toll on relationships. Money is one of the top reasons couples fight, and when one person is extremely budget conscious while the other has any other financial personality, conflict is built into the foundation. To the thrifty person, their partner's spending feels reckless and induces panic. To the partner, the penny pinching feels controlling and joyless. Neither person is necessarily wrong. They are simply operating from different money scripts running on autopilot. There is also a tragic paradox where tight-fisted people often have the resources to be generous, but they cannot access them psychologically. They might have significant savings while a friend is struggling, and they may genuinely want to help, but the thought of letting go of that money triggers such intense anxiety that they remain frozen. This leads to guilt, adding another layer of psychological complexity. Mental health professionals point out that compulsive saving can be just as problematic as compulsive spending when it interferes with your quality of life. When your behavior damages your relationships and prevents you from experiencing joy, you have moved from being good with money into territory that might require professional reflection. The ultimate irony is that extreme financial restraint often creates the opposite of the security it seeks. You become so worried about potential future problems that you cannot enjoy your present life. You're essentially living in a state of perpetual scarcity, even when the bank account says otherwise. In the end, this behavior is almost never about the money. It's about control, security, anxiety management, and inherited patterns that made sense at one point but now have calcified into habits that no longer serve you. Because thriftiness is often socially rewarded, careful spenders rarely get the feedback they need to examine the why behind their actions. Understanding these psychological roots is the first step in moving from a life governed by fear to one governed by intentionality.